It was supposed to be a normal day. Then my alien roommate walked in and froze. Her eyes widened in pure shock, not fear, not anger, but something far more dangerous, cultural. Misunderstanding. What she thought she saw wasn't what it actually was, but in her species. A tail is not just anatomy, it's a symbol tied to status, maturity, and social meaning humans never imagined. Within hours, rumors spread across the station. Assumptions were made, and suddenly, I was at the center of an alien controversy I never intended to start. This is not a story about embarrassment. It's a story about how human normalcy collides with alien interpretation, and how calm explanation, honesty, and restraint can prevent a galaxy-sized misunderstanding from becoming something far worse. The galaxy thought it's understood humans. It misunderstood everything. If you enjoy HFY sci-fi stories, alien culture shocks, and hilarious thought-provoking twists where humanity defies expectations, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Your support helps bring more original stories to life. He always believed privacy was the one thing that kept his life balanced. The small apartment he shared with his roommate was not perfect, but it was predictable. 2 bedrooms, a narrow hallway, a shared kitchen, and rules they both followed without ever needing to say them out loud. Knock before entering. Respect personal space. Pretend not to notice each other's strange habits. For him, those rules were not just polite behavior, they were protection. That evening felt ordinary at first. The day had been long, filled with work deadlines, traffic noise, and the kind of tiredness that settles deep into the body. When he finally reached home, he noticed the apartment was quiet. Her shoes were gone from the rack near the door, and the lights in her room were off. He assumed she was still out, maybe visiting a friend or working late. That thought gave him a sense of relief he didn't question. He locked his bedroom door, as he always did, and leaned against it for a moment. His room was the only place where he could truly relax. No pretending. No constant awareness of how he moved or sat. No fear of being seen the wrong way. He turned on a small lamp, letting the soft light fill the room, and took a deep breath. This was his safe space. For years, he had lived with a secret that shaped every decision he made. It was something he never talked about, something even doctors struggled to explain clearly. A rare condition, unusual and misunderstood, had been part of him since birth. It wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't something people easily accepted either. So he learned to hide it. He learned to adapt his clothes, his posture, and his routines. Over time, hiding became second nature. That night, believing he was alone, he let his guard down more than usual. He moved freely, stretching tired muscles, feeling the relief that came from not constantly controlling himself. For a few minutes, he forgot the world outside his room even existed. He forgot that sometimes rules failed. What he didn't know was that his roommate had come back early. Her meeting had been canceled, and she had returned home tired and distracted. As she stepped inside the apartment, she noticed something strange. His bedroom door, which was almost always locked, was slightly open, just enough to make her pause. She didn't mean to intrude. At least, that's what she would later tell herself. She knocked lightly once, then again. When there was no response, she assumed he might be wearing headphones or asleep. Thinking something might be wrong, she gently pushed the door open. The moment stretched longer than it should have. He turned at the sound, his body reacting before his mind caught up. His eyes met hers, and in that instant, everything froze. Her expression changed immediately: surprise, confusion, and something else he couldn't name. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in shock, as if she had seen something she'd never expected to see. The silence between them felt heavy, almost loud. His heart started racing. Every fear he had buried deep inside him rose to the surface all at once. Years of careful planning collapsed in a single second. He felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally. This was the moment he had always dreaded, the moment he believed would ruin everything. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, unable to look away, trying to understand what she was seeing. Her mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. He started, then stopped. His voice felt stuck in his throat. She quickly looked away, realizing she had crossed a line. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice unsteady. "I knocked. I thought something was wrong." He swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to pull himself together. Embarrassment washed over him, followed by fear. He had always imagined this moment ending badly: judgment, disgust, or rejection. But what scared him most was the unknown. He had no idea how she would react once the shock faded. "It's not what you think," he finally said, though he wasn't sure what she thought at all. She nodded quickly, still avoiding eye contact. "I shouldn't have come in. I'll go." She turned to leave, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the look on his face. Maybe it was the realization that whatever she had seen was clearly something he hadn't wanted anyone to know. She paused at the door. "You don't have to explain," she said softly. "But if you want to, I'll listen." Her words caught him off guard. For a long time, he had prepared himself for rejection, not understanding. He had lived with the belief that the safest option was silence. Yet here she was, offering him a choice instead of judgment. He sat down slowly, the weight of the moment pressing on him. His mind raced, searching for the right words. How did you explain a secret you had spent your entire life hiding? How did you turn years of fear into a simple explanation? "It's something I was born with," he said quietly. "I've had it my whole life." She turned back slightly, listening without interrupting. "I learned early on that people don't react well to things they don't understand," he continued. "So I learned to hide it. I moved cities. I avoided close relationships. I kept everything. Controlled." The room felt different now. Still tense, but no longer frozen. She sat down near the door, keeping a respectful distance, giving him space. "I didn't mean to see," she said again. "I swear." "I know," he replied, and for the first time, he meant it. As the reality of what had happened settled in, he realized something else too. The secret was out at least partly. There was no going back to how things were before. Whatever happened next would change their lives, whether he wanted it to or not. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had happened. Cars passed, voices echoed faintly through open windows, and time continued its steady pace. But inside that small bedroom, a single unexpected moment had shifted everything. He didn't know yet whether this was the beginning of a disaster or the start of something he had never allowed himself to hope for. All he knew was that the door had been opened literally and emotionally, and there was no closing it again. And as he looked at his roommate, sitting quietly and waiting without pressure, he realized that sometimes the moments we fear the most are the ones that force us to finally be seen. The room stayed quiet long after her last words faded. He could hear his own breathing, slow but uneven, like he had just finished running. The shock of being seen still sat heavy in his chest. Even though she was still there, sitting near the door and giving him space, he felt more alone than ever before. His secret was no longer fully his, and that truth made everything feel fragile. She didn't rush him. That small act mattered more than she probably realized. Most people filled silence with noise, questions, or advice. She didn't. She waited, her hands folded loosely in her lap. Her eyes lowered in a way that showed respect, not discomfort. It gave him the time he needed to gather his thoughts. He had practiced this moment in his head many times over the years. In those imagined scenes, the words came out smoothly. He explained everything calmly, and people reacted with understanding. But real life was never that simple. Now that the moment had arrived, his thoughts felt tangled, and his voice didn't want to cooperate. "I didn't plan for you to find out like this," he finally said. She nodded. "I figured," took a deep breath and looked down at the floor. Starting from the beginning felt safest. "When I was born," he said slowly, choosing each word with care, "the doctors noticed something unusual. They told my parents it was rare. Not dangerous, but uncommon. They didn't even know how to describe it properly." As he spoke, memories surfaced: hospital rooms, quiet conversations behind closed doors, adults whispering as if he couldn't hear them. As a child, he had sensed early on that he was different, even before he understood how. "My parents were scared," he continued. Not because of what it meant for my health, but because of how people might react. They tried to protect me. They taught me how to dress, how to sit, how to move. At first I thought everyone lived like that. She listened closely, her head tilted slightly, her expression calm but focused. It wasn't until school that I realized how cruel people could be, he said. Kids notice everything. Even small differences become reasons to stare or laugh. I learned fast that hiding was easier than explaining. He paused, his throat tightening. Talking about the past made old emotions rise again. Fear, shame, confusion, feelings he thought he had buried long ago. So I got good at it, he said. Hiding, I mean. I avoided sleepovers. I kept my distance. I made excuses. Over time, it became my normal. She shifted slightly, careful not to interrupt. Her presence felt steady, not judging. That steadiness gave him the courage to continue. When I got older, doctors offered options, he said. Procedures, changes, but none of them felt right to me. They wanted to fix something that wasn't hurting me, just making other people uncomfortable. He finally looked up at her, searching her face for any sign of doubt or disbelief. He didn't find it. So you decided to live with it, she said gently. Yes, he replied. But living with it meant living carefully. Always thinking ahead. Always making sure no one noticed. He gave a small, humorless smile. That's why I'm so strict about privacy. For the first time since she entered the room, she spoke more openly. I always wondered, she admitted. You were kind, but distant. Friendly, but guarded. I thought maybe you just didn't trust people. I wanted to, he said. I just didn't know how. The truth hung between them. It felt strange, almost unreal, to finally say these things out loud. Part of him expected the floor to open up, or the moment to turn ugly. But instead, the tension slowly softened. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Not for what you told me. For walking in. I know that wasn't easy for you. He nodded. It wasn't. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. Less heavy, more thoughtful. What happens now? She asked carefully. That question scared him more than anything else. He had built his life around control and predictability. Now, both were gone. He didn't have a clear answer. I don't know, he admitted. That's the part I never planned for. She leaned back slightly, giving him space again. I won't tell anyone, she said firmly. If that's what you're worried about, he looked at her sharply. You mean that? Yes, she replied without hesitation. This is your story, not mine. Her certainty surprised him. He had expected doubt, questions, maybe even distance. Instead, she offered trust. It made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. Thank you, he said softly. She stood up slowly, careful not to make him feel rushed. I think we both need some time, she said. To process everything, he nodded. Yeah, that would be good. As she reached the door, she paused again. Just so you know, she added, what I saw doesn't change how I see you. After she left, he sat alone in his room, staring at the wall. His body felt tired, but his mind wouldn't slow down. He replayed the conversation over and over, waiting for regret to hit him, waiting for fear to take over again. But something else appeared instead. Relief. For the first time in his life, someone knew the truth and hadn't turned away. The secret he carried for so long felt a little lighter now. Still heavy, still complicated, but no longer crushing. He knew things wouldn't magically become easy. There would be awkward moments, careful conversations, and maybe even misunderstandings. Trust didn't erase years of habit overnight, but the wall he had built around himself had cracked, and light was starting to slip through. Later that night, as the apartment settled into quiet again, he lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be different. He didn't know how yet, but he could feel it. Life had shifted, and there was no undoing it. For the first time, that thought didn't terrify him. Instead, it made him wonder what might be possible if he stopped hiding and allowed himself, just a little, to be understood. The next morning arrived quietly, but his mind was already awake. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, pieces of the night before replayed in his head. The sound of the door opening, the look on her face, the long silence that followed. When sunlight slipped through the curtains, he sat up slowly, feeling a mix of worry and strange calm. He listened carefully. The apartment was not silent anymore. Soft sounds came from the kitchen, a cup being set down, a drawer opening. She was awake. For a moment, he considered staying in his room all day. Hiding felt familiar, safe, but hiding had failed him already. After taking a deep breath, he stood up and changed into his usual clothes, the ones he always chose carefully. He checked himself twice, making sure everything was in place, just like always. Old habits didn't disappear overnight. When he stepped into the hallway, she was standing near the counter, making tea. She noticed him right away. There was a brief pause, but she didn't look shocked or uncomfortable. Instead, she gave a small, careful smile. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied, his voice low. They stood there for a second, unsure of what to do next. Then she nodded toward the table. "I made extra," she said. "Hey, if you want," he hesitated, then sat down. Felt strange, like learning how to walk again. Every movement felt noticed, even though she wasn't staring. He realized how used he was to being tense around people, always expecting something to go wrong. They drank in silence at first. Not the awkward kind, but the kind where both people were thinking. "I've been thinking," she said after a while, "about what you told me." His chest tightened slightly, but he nodded. "Okay, I hope you know," she continued, "that I don't see you differently. I see more, if that makes sense." He wasn't sure how to respond. No one had ever said something like that to him before. She set her cup down. "Can I ask something? You don't have to answer if you don't want to." He appreciated that she asked. "You can ask," he said. "How long have you lived like this?" she asked. "Always being careful, always hiding." He thought for a moment. "As long as I can remember," he said. "It's just how life was." "That sounds exhausting," she said quietly. He gave a small laugh. "It is." Her words opened something inside him. He hadn't realized how much he needed someone to acknowledge that. To recognize the effort it took just to exist normally. "I keep thinking about how alone that must have felt," she added. He looked down at his hands. It was, he admitted. "But I told myself it was better than being judged." She nodded slowly. "Maybe. But it also kept people from knowing you." That statement stayed with him, knowing him. Not the version he showed the world, but the real one. Later that day, they both went about their routines, but something had changed. Small things felt different. She knocked before entering shared spaces, even the kitchen, as if trying to show extra care. He noticed it and felt grateful, though he didn't say anything. In the afternoon, a problem appeared. A neighbor knocked on their door, complaining about a leak from the apartment above. It was a simple thing, but it required both of them to step out into the hallway together. Normally, he would have found a way to avoid it, but this time he followed her. As they stood outside talking to the neighbor, he felt the familiar tension rise. His body stiffened, his awareness sharpening. He wondered if she noticed, if she understood now what those moments cost him. When they returned inside, she closed the door gently. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, just habits." She hesitated, then said, "If there's ever a moment you need help, or space, or someone to step in for you, just tell me." The offer caught him off guard. "Why?" he asked, before he could stop himself. She shrugged lightly. "Because roommates help each other. And because I care." That word stayed with him long after she left the room. That evening, as they cooked dinner together, something unexpected happened. They laughed, not forced, not careful, real laughter. Over burnt food, over small jokes. It felt normal in a way he hadn't felt in years. For a brief moment, he forgot to be afraid. Later, sitting alone in his room again, he realized something important. Her reaction hadn't just been kind, it had been steady. She hadn't treated him like a problem or a mystery. She treated him like a person. Still, fear lingered. One person knowing was one thing. The world was another. Questions filled his mind. What if someone else found out? What if this changed? How she talked about him to others, even by accident? Trust was hard when you had spent your life protecting yourself. That night, he heard a soft knock on his door. Yes. Shh, he called. I just wanted to say good night, she said from the other side, and thank you for trusting me. He sat on his bed, surprised. You're welcome, he replied. After she walked away, he stared at the door for a long time. Trust. The word felt heavy and unfamiliar. But for the first time, he considered that maybe trust didn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe it could be built slowly, through small moments and simple choices. The next few days followed a quiet pattern. No big talks, no dramatic moments, just shared meals, casual conversations, and mutual respect. And with each passing day, the tightness in his chest eased just a little. He still didn't know where this would lead. Life rarely gave clear answers. Something inside him had shifted. The world hadn't ended when he was seen. Instead, it had grown slightly warmer. And as he fell asleep one night, he realized that being understood, even by one person, was more powerful than hiding from everyone else. Days passed, and the apartment slowly settled into a new rhythm. On the surface, everything looked the same. They went to work, shared chores, and talked about ordinary things like groceries and bills. But underneath that normal routine, something deeper was changing for him. For the first time in years, he wasn't completely alone with his thoughts. Still, the outside world didn't know his truth, and that reality began to press on him again. It started with small signs. A coworker invited him to a team dinner. A neighbor stopped him in the hallway to chat longer than usual. Situations like these had always made him uneasy, but now the fear felt sharper. Not because of himself, but because one mistake could pull his secret into the open. One evening, he came home later than usual, his shoulders tense, his face tired. His roommate noticed immediately. "Rough day?" she asked, handing him a glass of water. He nodded and sat down heavily on the couch. "Work thing," he said. "Nothing big." She didn't push, but she stayed nearby, folding laundry while giving him space. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "They want me to travel next month," he said quietly. She paused. "Is that bad?" He hesitated. "It's complicated." Travel meant shared rooms, long hours, little privacy. Situations where control slipped easily. He had avoided those opportunities his whole life, even when they could have helped his career. Saying no always came with excuses. This time felt harder. She sat down across from him. "Do you want to talk about it?" He rubbed his hands together slowly. "I'm tired of always choosing fear," he admitted. "But I don't know how to choose anything else." Her eyes softened. "You don't have to decide everything at once," she said. "You can take it one step at a time." Her words were simple, but they stayed with him. A few days later, that fear took a more real shape. They were both in the kitchen when someone knocked on the apartment door. Unexpected visitors always made his heart jump. His roommate glanced at him, then went to answer it. It was their landlord, standing with a clipboard and a serious expression. "There's an inspection tomorrow," he said. "Just a routine check. I wanted to let you know." Tomorrow? The word echoed in his head. Inspections meant strangers walking through the apartment, opening doors, checking rooms. He felt his pulse quicken. "Tomorrow?" his roommate asked. "That's a bit sudden." "I know," the landlord replied. "It won't take long." When the door closed, he felt the familiar wave of panic rise. His room was a safe place. The idea of someone else entering it made his chest tighten. She turned to him immediately. "Hey," she said gently. "We'll handle it." He looked at her, worry clear in his eyes. "What if they don't need to go into your room?" she said firmly. "We'll make sure of it." "But if they insist, then I'll step in," she replied without hesitation. He was stunned by her confidence. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said. "I want to—" That night, he barely slept. He went over every possible outcome in his mind, preparing for the worst. Years of habit told him to expect trouble. But when morning came, something different happened. The inspection was quick. The landlord checked the common areas, glanced around, and moved on. When he gestured toward the hallway, his roommate calmly said his room wasn't available due to work equipment inside. The landlord shrugged and continued without question. When the door finally closed behind him, his legs felt weak with relief. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. She smiled. "See? One step." That moment changed something important. It showed him that support didn't always mean big gestures. Sometimes it was just someone standing between you and your fear. But the test wasn't over yet. Later that week, a misunderstanding at work nearly unraveled everything. A coworker joked loudly about secrets during a group lunch, laughing and pointing in his direction. It was harmless, probably meaningless, but it sent his thoughts spiraling. His face grew hot, his appetite vanished, and he left early, claiming he felt sick. When he got home, he went straight to his room and shut the door. Old instincts told him to shut everyone out, to retreat completely. An hour later, there was a soft knock. "It's me," she said from the other side. "Can I come in?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." She stepped inside carefully. "You left work early," she said. "What happened?" He told her everything, his words tumbling out faster than he meant them to. The joke, the fear, the way his mind always jumped to the worst-case scenario. She listened quietly, then said, "It sounds like you've been fighting this alone for a very long time." He sank onto the bed. "I don't know how to stop. You don't have to stop being careful," she said. "But maybe you don't have to punish yourself either." Her words struck deep. He realized how harsh he had been on himself over the years. How every close call felt like a personal failure instead of just a difficult moment. "Do you ever think about telling anyone else?" she asked gently. The question scared him. "I don't think the world is ready," he said. She nodded. "That's okay. You don't owe anyone your story." That reassurance mattered. It reminded him that choice was still his. That night, after she left the room, he sat quietly, reflecting on everything that had happened. The near exposure, the protection, the fear, the support. He realized something important. For years, he had believed strength meant silence, that survival meant hiding. But now he was starting to see another kind of strength, the kind that allowed someone else to stand beside you. The world outside was still unpredictable. People could still judge or misunderstand. That hadn't changed. But inside that small apartment, he wasn't facing it alone anymore. And for the first time, that felt like enough to keep going, even when fear tried to pull him backward. Life didn't change overnight, but it no longer felt stuck either. After everything that had happened, he noticed small shifts inside himself. He still woke up cautious. He still checked his surroundings and planned his movements. Those habits were part of him, but they no longer felt like chains. They felt like choices he could slowly learn to loosen. The apartment felt warmer now. Not because anything physical had changed, but because the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt comfortable. They talked more about simple things at first. Work stress, bad coffee, childhood memories that had nothing to do with secrets. Each conversation built something quiet and steady between them. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, they sat in the living room, watching an old movie. The lights were dim, the room calm. He realized he wasn't tense. His shoulders were relaxed. His breathing was steady. That alone felt like a victory. Halfway through the movie, she spoke. "Can I tell you something?" He glanced at her. "Sure. I'm proud of you," she said simply. The words caught him off guard. "For what?" "For surviving the way you did," she replied. "And for trusting someone now." "That takes courage," he swallowed, emotion rising unexpectedly. He had never thought of himself as brave. He had always seen himself as careful, fearful, hiding. Hearing her frame his life differently changed something in him. "Thank you," he said quietly. A few weeks later, the moment came that truly tested him. At work, his manager called him in for a meeting. He expected another discussion about deadlines or travel plans. Instead, he was offered a promotion. It came with responsibility, respect, and visibility. More meetings, more people, less control. He walked home that day with his thoughts racing. Part of him wanted to refuse immediately. just like he always had before. It would be safer, easier, familiar. When he told his roommate, he expected advice. Instead, she asked one question. "What do you want?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. No one had ever asked him that so directly. He thought about the years he had spent, shrinking his life to fit his fear. He thought about the relief he had felt when someone finally knew him and stayed. "I want to stop running," he said at last. "Even if I'm still scared?" She smiled softly. "Then maybe this is your step." That night, he barely slept, not from fear alone, but from something new. Hope. The next day, he accepted the promotion. It wasn't easy. The following weeks were challenging. There were moments when anxiety crept in, moments when he wanted to pull back again. But every time fear rose, he reminded himself of one truth. Being seen hadn't destroyed him. It had strengthened him. At home, things stayed steady. Support didn't mean constant reassurance. It meant understanding glances, quiet respect. Knowing someone was there, if things felt heavy. One evening, after a long day, he stood in his room and looked at himself in the mirror. He saw the same person he had always been, but he also saw growth. He saw someone who had survived, adapted, and finally allowed himself a little peace. He realized that acceptance wasn't about changing who he was. It was about letting go of the idea that he had to be hidden to be safe. A few months later, something unexpected happened. A coworker, struggling with a personal issue, confided in him. As he listened, he recognized the same fear in their voice, the fear of being judged, of being rejected for who they truly were. In that moment, he understood the power of empathy. He didn't need to share his own secret to help someone else. He just needed to listen, the way he had once been listened to. Life continued forward, imperfect but real. One night, sitting on the balcony with his roommate, watching city lights blur into the distance, he spoke words he never thought he would say. "I don't hate myself anymore," he said. She didn't respond right away. She just nodded, as if she understood the weight of that statement. "That might be the biggest win of all," she finally said. He smiled, feeling a quiet sense of peace settle inside him. His secret didn't define him. Fear didn't own him. And while the world might never fully understand, he had learned something far more important. Being different didn't mean being alone. And sometimes, the moment you fear the most, the moment someone truly sees you as, the moment your life finally begins to move forward.